stories that I thought were interesting. There is a new NIST-approved cryptographic scheme designed for small devices. It's for Internet of Things gadgets like car fobs to unlock cars, devices with very weak processor and very little memory. And they had a whole contest for small devices, and they've approved a new series of family of cryptographic algorithms named ASCON. And well, I'm sure we'll be hearing a lot more about this, and I'll probably have to add it to my cryptography course. It's interesting to me. I thought the existing encryption routines were already quite small and fast, but they've made ones that are even smaller and even faster. So as long as they're secure, I would think they would become very popular then. So we'll probably be hearing a lot more about this. Now, what is this garbage? Okay, this is very interesting. A researcher named John Haidt, I've heard podcasts with this guy, and his point is that social media is killing our kids. And he has data for this. And one comment which a lot of people made, including me, is that all the way back for thousands of years, the old people say kids these days are ruining their lives with whatever the new thing kids are doing. And so maybe it's just standard old people griping and it doesn't matter. And he says, no, social media really are harming our kids in a way that is different than all the things that came before, like video games and comic books and everything else that kids have done. And so he considers the criticism and then made this document to list a lot of information, and then he has some very interesting reports. And here's the percent of U.S. teens with major depression. Girls are more depressed than boys, and boys about 5%, and girls around 12%, and it's just flat until 2012, when it starts going up and increases by more than doubling for both girls and boys. So something happened around 2012 that greatly made our teenagers report that they feel depressed a lot more. Now, this is self-reporting that they're depressed. So some people say, well, maybe there's just the modern society encourages you to be open about your mental problems more. That's an option. And so here he has people that are diagnosed with a mental illness. So this is more than just self-reporting. And again, look at this enormous increase in many things. Bipolar, anorexia, substance abuse, schizophrenia, all these are gone greatly up. Depression and anxiety are way up. And the increase happens around 2012. And then you can take other objective measures of children being in bad shape, like how many of them are admitted to hospitals for non-fatal self-harm, primarily cutting themselves. And you see it's pretty much flat until 2012, and then it goes up. Girls goes up by 48%, boys goes up by 37%. And then you have younger kids from 10 to 14, and look at this enormous tripling of the number of cases of this for the girls, and no significant change for the boys. So this is the one that makes most obvious the claim I hear all the time. The shorthand for this is that Instagram is very bad for girls, and there's quite a lot of movement for a desire that there should be a age requirement for using social media. The primary offender, which he's going to have in a later article, the details for the data for that. The primary offender is Instagram, and the primary victim class is girls. And I haven't heard anyone serious suggest any reason to explain exactly why, but my guess is that they are comparing their life and their appearance to the pictures of other girls they see on Instagram, and they are depressed that they aren't as pretty or as rich or as happy as they feel like they should be. And here's another measure, suicide. An increase in both boys and girls since 2010. So his argument is something about our current society is very unhealthy for kids, and it happened around 2012, and he's blaming social media from that time coincidence. 2012, I guess, is when Instagram became popular with kids, and that'll be in a future article. So anyway, it's a very interesting, very compelling data suggesting that there really is something wrong with the teenagers of today, and we should probably do something about it. And like I say, the recommended solution I hear Scott Galloway talk about is that you just require you to be an adult to use social media like alcohol and cigarettes. We should regard it as something that is not safe for children to use. And that is certainly one possibility. I was amazed to read this. VMware ESXi servers have a vulnerability. Many of them have a vulnerability that was patched 2 years ago. They just have been lazy at putting the patches on because, of course, patching the ESXi underneath a cloud service that's providing all these virtual machines would require taking the whole thing down for quite a while. So it would be an expensive operation, so people just haven't been doing it. And now they're getting infected with ransomware. But I was surprised to see this. Because of ESXi, they say now most modern ransomware targets Linux in addition to Windows. I thought it would be rare to have malware targeting Linux, but that is no longer true. They say most modern ransomware also attacks Linux machines. So that's an important issue of the threat modeling. There's a lot of people, I've got a friend that did this, a lot of people do biohacking where they implant things under their body, like RFID tags so they can unlock their car and doors, which is a identifying thing you can't remove, or you install magnets in your fingers so you can sense magnetic fields because it moves the magnet. And that's what this person did, DNS Princess, and she had trouble with her magnets, and it turned out that they were not as harmless as they were supposed to be, and they caused scar tissue, and they eventually she's having to have them removed. So the people that are into body modification, which is quite a few people, would be interested, I suppose, in reading about her experiences and finding out what the right components are to make things you're going to implant in your body. Cloudflare is introducing a hosted Mastodon client that you can have. Instead of joining one of the public Mastodon servers like the one I'm on, infosec.exchange, you can have your own on Cloudflare. They call it Wildebeest. I don't really know why you would want to make your own server. I think your company might want to make its own server for your own company internal discussions or something. But anyway, it's they're offering it, and I saw some experts on Mastodon already complaining that the problem is they let full-text search be on by default, and they regard full-text search as a privacy intrusion and think it should not be on by default. But that's all I heard. Anyway, the Cloudflare apparently has something called a super cloud, so they will host machines for you, which is something I also did not know. So anyway. And I suppose we'll be hearing more about that as time goes on. So somebody got Windows 11, and they just turned on Wireshark to see what Windows 11 does when it just boots up. And what it does is it sends a ton of data about you to a ton of services. So it's more like a web page viewing a popular website with hundreds of trackers. And I think everyone should have known this since Windows 8 anyway, but in case you don't, modern versions of Windows do connect to a ton of cloud services. And he just looked at DNS traffic and found that it's talking to Steam, McAfee, ComScore, Core Scorecard Research, a market research company, and many others. This is true of almost every device you have. It contacts all these cloud providers and ranges from innocent things like trying to block malware to basically things that are gathering data on you and reselling that data onto other people. So this is why the market of stolen personal data is enormous in America. That's why it is kind of crazy. We have the Fourth Amendment to protect us from the government taking our data, but there's nothing to protect private companies from taking our data, and companies like Google and Facebook collect an unbelievable amount of data, and they put it in a database and they sell it. So people can just buy it. So recently I'm reading articles where the police go and buy that data, and then they use it. And they're trying to decide whether that's legal. But this thing, humans, Americans are anxious to protect their privacy against the police, but they will totally hand it over to people like Google and Facebook and CNN and everybody without thinking twice. These letters, they're coming up, these letters are written in a script. They're written centuries ago, in the 16th century. And they thought these were from a French nobility. Many of these letters have been sitting in some kind of museum for centuries, and nobody could read them. And they finally, after a whole team of cryptographers spent like 20 years figuring out how to crack it. Language experts and historians and cryptographers worked together, and they figured out what it is. And these are the long-lost letters of Mary, Queen of Scots, who was the steward in line for the throne, and another person, I think Elizabeth I, imprisoned her and eventually executed her as a rival for the throne. And while she was in prison, she corresponded with people discussing how she should try to take the throne and stuff, a conspiratorial plot for which she was eventually executed. And now they have all those documents because they finally cracked this code, being extremely difficult to crack. These symbols stand for whole words in in French, I think, or Italian, I forget what. I think they're actually in French, but they thought they were Italian, something like that. And it had 50,000 words of deciphered material. So, these low-tech, long before computers, there were really strong cryptography systems in use for what amounts to essentially military secrets here. And so it took centuries to crack it. So this is interesting, and I've heard about this also on the All In podcast, which I highly recommend, which is where you will hear the PayPal mafia, Elon Musk's friends who are currently running Twitter, discuss every week, explaining how they see management and finance and politics. And it's very interesting, a very different perspective than what you'll see from journalists. But anyway, Meta has the company formerly known as Facebook, has a lot of people who are managers, and they say as the company grew, many people got promoted to management until there's a lot of managers, and especially when the pandemic hit and everybody's working from home, there's a bunch of managers, and it's not really clear that the people need managing. And managers don't do any actual work. They just sit in meetings all day long. And mostly they're just sitting in Zoom meetings on mute, not doing anything. And so now they're going to get rid of this class of managers, which I've certainly noticed this. If you get promoted, you never do anything but go to meetings forever. That's why I avoided promotion at the college. All you do is sit in meetings and be lied to all day long. The same thing is true if you're a politician. Your whole life is raising money and sitting in meetings being lied to. And so anyway, they're now trying to get rid of that. They're trying to make a process they're calling it flattening, where you remove all these mid-level managers, and every manager has to prove that they actually do something valuable instead of just going to meetings. So we will see. It's not just Meta. Essentially, every corporation has this issue where you have more and more layers of management until there's a whole lot of managers that just seem to accomplish nothing. And Google is going to give away 100,000 security keys. Now you can already turn on two-factor authentication for your Gmail and your Facebook and pretty much everything. And usually your second factor is an SMS message or something like the Google Authenticator app on your cell phone. And that's pretty good. But the highest security is to have a physical key, which you plug into like a USB port or connect by Bluetooth to prove that you really have the object as your second factor. That is considered the most secure form of two-factor authentication, and Google's going to give away 100,000 free of these keys to people to who they regard as people at high risk, like journalists and professionals in politics. So,
RSA keys?
What's that?
Is that like RSA keys?
Yeah, it's like an RFID or something. Yeah. It's got some wireless. I don't know exactly about this brand, but they usually have USB and they also have RFID or Bluetooth or something, some kind of wireless transmission too. People were surprised they're not giving away the most famous brand of these. They're giving some other brand. Maybe they got a special deal on them. But anyway, this is probably what we should all move to, is having these keys you carry around to authenticate yourself. And this is a leak. The Russian internet provider Convex, somebody dumped 120 gigabytes of data from this, and it proves that the Russians are totally spying on everything in Russia. In case anybody didn't know, this is probably the equivalent of Edward Snowden over here, that revealed that the NSA was spying on Americans much more than anybody thought they were. And here it shows that the Russians have a thing called the Green Atom Surveillance Program, where they're monitoring internet and phone activities of just everybody in Russia. Which
the UK also.
yes, the UK is part of the Five Eyes. And and just like in America, they're not supposed to, and there are some limits. Yeah.
Does everybody want to complain about China's surveillance, but then it's doing the same thing here?
Yes, you're right. And China, of course, is doing it too, with the Great Firewall. All right. Anyway, let me stop this recording.